Hello everyone and welcome to today's live Q&A. And I'm joined by Eric. He's from AP Prep. He's going to be going through a lot of the changes to do with FBA fees, with explaining storage limits and restock limits, or rather storage volume and restock limits. And we're going to give you our best answers on those because some of them are variable, but this is really a single video where you can gain all the info you need on the fees and storage associated with selling on Amazon. But Eric, a big welcome and thank you for joining us again.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. It's always fun to be a part of the program. Just to introduce myself, I've been selling on Amazon for about 8 years, and it's been a really good experience, really fun experience. And probably a little over 2 years ago, we launched this third-party logistics warehouse facility that provides Amazon automation, allows us to serve third-party sellers to get their product into the FBA system in a way that's efficient, cost-effective, and can navigate the limits that we're going to talk about today. So that too has been a fun experience. Amazon has its challenges, but it's really been a cool experience over the last decade to be learning to lead my own business and using the Amazon platform to leverage that.
For sure. And actually just a quick note on that is I actually use Eric's 3PL myself, and it's just been an absolutely streamlined process. I literally just have to say, okay, let's replenish so they hold the bulk of the inventory. And I just say, hey, let's replenish once the stock gets low, and then it's taken care of. So it is an awesome service. But let's jump in to some of our content here, Eric. And the first thing is, are there any FBA fee changes this year specifically? We can look at the US to start, as most sellers are selling there, but this is to do with the FBA fulfillment fees.
Yeah, there are FBA fee changes. I think we should expect FBA fee changes. Amazon is not remaining stagnant, and they're growing, and the number of third-party sellers is growing. And so I think, not just because of inflation, though that's an argument, but just because Amazon can be leveraging opportunities like this to increase their fees, they're going to do it. So there are fee changes. I can share my screen and we can talk through the details of what those look like as they're presented.
Let's do that.
By Amazon. But, this shouldn't be a surprise to any of us, and it shouldn't be anything that really gets us sideways, because it's just kind of the normal way of things. So you can see here, January 18th was the magical date. So this was very recent that they implemented these changes, and they're nominal but not insignificant changes that sweep pretty much across the board. So you can see, there are fulfillment fee increases for all your sizes and all your weights. So you've got an increase. So for 6 ounces or less, you've got an increase from $2.70 per unit to $2.92 per unit, which is a little less than 10%. I think we're looking at like a 7 or 8% increase in general with these fees.
For sure. And we'll also drop some links below after this where you can actually go through here and look at your specific category if needed. Anything else on this specifically, Eric?
No, I mean, this is one area that Amazon's pretty transparent with regard to. So they, are going to make very plain what their fee increases look like. And it's just good to note that they're pretty sweeping. So that fee chart that I just showed you applies to everything except for apparel. So if you're listening to the program and you specialize in apparel, it's helpful to know that the increases in regard to apparel were greater than any other category this year. Amazon didn't feel the need to explain to us why that is, but they did publish that. And you can likewise find a chart that explains all the apparel fees. But, there were storage fee increases, which we can look at if you want to. And there was what's called an inventory surcharge. That's an additional long-term storage fee assessment as well.
Okay. Before we jump into those specifically, can you talk just a little bit about what is the difference between restock limits and storage volume? these are like these two new facets we've had to struggle with. But what's the difference between those two?
Yeah. And those limits are a little different than these fees that we're talking about. So the fees, are general monetary assessments that Amazon's implementing in order to fulfill the services that they provide given their infrastructure. And we want those services. So in one sense, we're happy to pay them. The limits are Amazon's effort in the last 2 years, really since the pandemic hit and online sales volume skyrocketed for Amazon. Most of you have kind of walked through the experience, if nothing else, as a customer, recognizing that there was massive bottlenecks when it came to Amazon's fulfillment. What used to be 2-day prime shipping in the US was taking 2 to 3 weeks. So these limits are what Amazon imposed on the entire FBA infrastructure in order to try to streamline their fulfillment process. So you've got two primary limits. And Dan, I'll share this because I think this would be helpful for our folks to see. This is a limit comparison, and it kind of unpacks the two limits. So in the old days, 2 years ago, Amazon instituted an ASIN level limit. It was a one straightforward limit, and it hovered over every specific ASIN. So if you had 5 ASINs, you would have a limit for each ASIN depending on its sales volume, etc. Now what they did is they've replaced that about a year ago with 2 limits. And you can see here, one is called a restock limit, one's called a storage volume limit. And they're pretty different. The restock limit, as you can see here, is basically Amazon's preventing you from just sending in whatever number of units that you want. They're going to determine the number of units that you can send in. And it doesn't focus on one particular ASIN. It hovers over your entire account. So your entire account is limited based on what you can send in for restock. So it's based on the number of units that you're shipping in. That's the focus on restock limits. When the storage volume limit is in effect, it's not a per unit limit. It's, as the title suggests, it's a volume limit. It's how much space your products are taking up in an Amazon fulfillment center, and they're going to limit the volume that you can utilize within the fulfillment centers around the country.
For sure. And just to add to that, so if you're a brand new seller, the minimum if you're an individual seller, so you're on an individual seller account, you're going to have 10 cubic feet at minimum of storage volume. So how much your inventory can take up in cubic feet at the fulfillment center. And a professional account, so you have a professional seller account, you will have a minimum of 25 cubic feet. Of course, it can be much greater, but those are the minimums that sellers get as they begin. And then over time, as Eric will probably get into here, this IPI score is something that's going to impact these limits and how much you can actually send and store. If you want to expand on that a bit, Eric.
Yeah, so an IPI score is something that begins to be calculated based on a number of factors that you can look at through your Amazon Seller Central account. And it's basically Amazon's way of determining how efficient its fulfillment structure is for the items you're selling. And then they give you a score. And currently, they've lowered this, which is a help to a lot of sellers. Currently, if your IPI score is above 400, this storage volume limit is not immediately affected. So you can see under here, the third row here, it says IPI score relevance for the storage volume limit. This limit only applies if your IPI score is below the threshold, which currently is 400. Now, Amazon reserves the right to change that threshold, and they have in the past. But currently, if your IPI score is above 400, or as Dan alluded to, if you're a new seller and you don't yet have an IPI score, then this storage volume limit doesn't apply. But you can see here, IPI score relevance for the restock limit, there is none. So the restock limit is significantly different, and your IPI score has no relevance when it comes to the restock limit.
Okay, and in terms of that, if we move on to what metrics are actually going to impact that, Eric, in terms of, what do I have to focus on as a seller to ensure I have maximum storage volume and maximum restock limits? I can send more in. Those are obviously dependent on IPI, but what are the actual metrics I should focus on?
Well, the storage volume limit is dependent upon IPI. So you want to monitor your IPI and keep it above 400 for the sake of that, the storage volume limit. But frankly, to keep it above 400 isn't difficult. So sell-through rate is really important. You don't want to have a maximum number of units that are just sitting complacent in the Amazon FBA system. Amazon wants to see, again, they want to be a fulfillment system. So they want your products to come in and go out. And then they want to facilitate you sending more in and those going out. They don't want to be a warehousing and a storage facility. So they don't want you to send in products and for them to sit. And so sell-through rate is probably the best thing to work on and monitor when it comes to keeping your IPI score high. Now, when it comes to something like the restock limit, the conversation changes a little because now we're not talking about IPI score. IPI score is irrelevant for the restock limit. Amazon holds their cards pretty close when it comes to disclosing all the factors that are involved in your restock limits. And we have found in our experience in serving hundreds of clients that the restock limit is pretty variable. If you've got 10 clients, you've probably got 10 different restock limits or 10 different approaches to the restock limit. So I think it would be worth spending a little bit of time on that. The simplest answer is that the single most significant variable for your restock limit going up, which you want it to, is sales volume. So Amazon's made very clear the more sales you make, the more we're going to lift your limits. Again, because if you got products going out, you're making a lot of sales, then Amazon's going to say, hey, send more in. We like that. We want you to be sending stuff in and having it going out. But if your sales volume is low, they're going to say, oop, stop sending stuff in because we don't want to bog down the system with complacent units.
Okay. And then, Eric, so if you could explain, and I'm just going to combine these, but number one, when would a seller experience these storage volume limits or restock limits, but they're limited on what they can sell in or send in? And, why does that make scaling the business so difficult? And after that, how does AP Prep help with that? How does your service, your 3PL, actually help negate that problem?
Yeah, so limits are gonna start immediately. So the minute you create an Amazon Seller Central account, you're gonna have limits, primarily restock limits. In other words, if you're a new seller and you create a new Seller Central account, you can't just turn around and have your supplier send 2,000 units into Amazon. I don't know of a case where that is ever gonna work. Amazon's not gonna allow it. What they're gonna do is limit the quantity that you can send in, and then they're gonna monitor your sales performance. So if you're a brand new seller, you're going to have a limit of some kind. Amazon's not published clearly what it looks like from a restock perspective. From a volume perspective, they have made it clear. And I think Dan said them already. If you're an individual seller, it's 10%, 10 cubic square feet. Is that right? Cubic feet?
Yes, 10. And then 25 for professional.
That's right. So if you're a professional seller, which we almost always recommend you take the professional route, it's not a large expense and there's a lot of benefits that come with it. Then you've got 25 cubic feet. Am I saying that right? So you do have a bit of a storage volume limit. If you're sending in large products, you're going to be limited in the number of units that you can send in, but you're also limited right out of the gate from the straight up number of units you can send based on restock limits. And then Amazon's going to monitor your sales. So, if you send in a product that's mediocre in its sales, they're not going to squash your ability to restock that product, but you're going to have severe limits in what you can send in subsequent to that. If you make really strong sales, then they're going to adjust the limit according to those sales, among other factors.
Okay, and then how does AP Prep come into that? Not only in terms of easing those issues, but what are the other benefits of using the 3PL that you would mention?
Yeah, having a 3PL facility that you can use, I do think gives you a number of advantages. It gives you agility and flexibility when it comes to managing your inventory. So what we do is we provide US based warehousing, and you can have, so if you wanted to manufacture 5,000 units and have them shipped to the US, you could have them sent right to our 3PL facility. You can't ship them to Amazon. So if you want to manufacture that many, you're in a bit of a quandary, but we'll receive your units, we'll store them for you, and then our Amazon automated process will allow us to ship products into the Amazon FBA system on your behalf at your request. So it allows you the flexibility to navigate limits. If Amazon says you can only send in 400 units, you're free to send in 400 units. The cost is minimal because we're sending to Amazon fulfillment centers from a US based location using the Amazon partnered carrier shipping rate. So to ship those products is a minimal expense for you. And then you can monitor the restrictions. And if Amazon lifts those, you're free to immediately ship product at any time. And for sellers who have multiple ASINs, this just amplifies their ability to be agile. So if you have been selling 10 products over the course of the last 2 to 3 years and you want to launch a new product, the launch of that new product is going to affect your whole account. The restock limits, again, are account wide. So it's not a bad risk, but there's risk involved in launching a new product, and it's just really helpful to have that flexibility. We've also found, one of the worst things you can do is to have a strong product launch and run out of inventory. You can close your listing, you can do a few things to try to mitigate that, but a lot of our clients have found that they have a nice safety valve to prevent them from ever running out of inventory, because you've got an on-deck circle, so to speak, where your inventory can hang out. And again, you can manufacture a larger quantity and have it positioned and ready to go in the 3PL facility, which saves you a per unit cost when you manufacture the product, and then makes certain that you won't run out of inventory. And the money that sellers lose because they run out of inventory is way greater than any money you're going to spend on the services a 3PL provides.
For sure. I wanted to definitely mention the unit cost one because you can order much larger batches and you can build on that kind of schedule of ordering. But also another one I will mention, and viewers who've seen a lot of the content here will know this well, but is also you're reducing your risk of platform or listing restrictions. And so having that 3PL can actually help you negate that risk a little bit, because you're not sending everything direct, like 3,000 units. What you can do is send the 3,000 to a 3PL and then send 500. And in this way, if there's ever a problem, a restriction, it's not on absolutely everything. You're keeping some of your cards aside. It's one of the things I value about it a lot. But this is perfect, Eric. And then I also wanted to just touch on this, and everyone in the chat box, we will be with your questions in a moment. Please also don't forget to click like if you are enjoying this. But one of the things I wanted to mention, Eric, is my perspective of using a 3PL. Just really briefly, but how it works is you simply send your inventory from your supplier to the 3PL in your marketplace country. So if you sell in the US, the 3PL has to be in the US. And then from there, in AP Prep's case, Eric's service, they actually gain access to your seller account. You provide them access to that area for shipments, and they will create a shipping plan whenever you require. And that sends in the inventory to Amazon as per Amazon's partnered rates. So it's a very good rate. And you can do that at will whenever you require and the quantity that you wish to send in. And that's really how simple it is. So that's what a 3PL is and what AP Prep does for anyone who's brand new to it or confused. But Eric, anything else you want to touch on before we jump into the questions?
Well, one other advantage that occurred to me as you were speaking is we have a number of clients. Well, the majority of our clients are outside the U.S., and so they benefit in a number of ways from having a U.S.-based facility that they can function out of. And one of the advantages of that is that they can create and process removal orders. And frankly, US-based clients do the same thing because they don't want, if they're living in a 2-bedroom apartment, they don't really want to handle removal orders, which can be messy. So we have clients who have seasonal products and they'll do a removal order. So this is a way for you to navigate limits. If you have a unit restock limit and you create a removal order, if you withdraw 1,000 units from your Amazon Seller Central account, it frees up 1,000 units for then you replenish whatever product is relevant for the current season. So we have clients that, in the fall, they remove their spring and summer products and they ship in winter products. And then in the spring, they do the opposite. And we are willing to provide services to process your removal orders. And that can be really helpful. Or if you just have a product that's not selling. So that's just another reason why having a facility like that is helpful. Because you can't process a removal order if you're at an international location.
100%. I can't believe I forgot that one. But it provides like you more confidence over the process because you're not so much at the beck and call of what Amazon just decides. So that's the benefit there. And if we jump into these, and hello everyone in the chat box, also welcome Ritesh to the YouTube membership. But Burhan asks, Dan, please make a video on trademarks because trademarks and brand registry are two different things. What are the things we should consider when doing a trademark so that we can get approved? So there are a number of things. Number one, you should consider with the trademark itself, like your brand name, the word mark. And in fact, I have a video specifically on this coming out on Tuesday. So make sure you watch that. I'll also link it below this at that time. But the key is keep it fanciful. So if you think about a name like, I often use the name Kitchen Pro. If that was your brand name, it locks you into specifically selling kitchen stuff, but it's also quite descriptive, Kitchen Pro. It's harder to trademark. So you're going to have more success trademarking a fanciful name. And fanciful really means made up. So like if Eric and I did a brand, we could like make a name like Eric Dan. Like that could be, it's made up, it's unique. And so that's a fanciful name. You're going to have more chance of registering successfully. And then in terms of brand registry approval, I 100% recommend you do Amazon IP Accelerator. Those are law firms that Amazon has approved. And therefore, even when your mark is applied for, but before it's successfully registered, you can get brand registry. So that's 100% the way I would go about doing it once you have a fanciful name. And if you want to know more about coming up with a name and creating your logo, etc., definitely watch the video Tuesday. I'll also link below for you Amazon IP Accelerator so you can find these specific approved lawyers there. But Eric, anything to add on this one or we move to the next?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, fanciful brand names to me are the way to go. They give you opportunity. It's easier to get a domain name, easier to get social media handles. And I think they have just a unique brand attraction. Usually if the goal is to find a phonetically pleasing one. Eric Dan would probably fall short. But yeah, so I think fanciful is the way to go. And Amazon's brand registry, though, isn't the same as a trademark, is meant to be a fast track for you getting brand registry perks before you've officially, when I got my trademark years ago, I had to wait 10 or 11 months and then apply to brand registry. And Amazon's just streamlined the whole thing, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, for Amazon sellers, they often get a bit into the weeds of the trademark itself, but the primary reason you want it is brand registry. So that's why Amazon IP is so cool. Yeah, so you just want to be able to register it, get brand registry. And then next up here, Arunima, and thank you for joining again. While selling in Amazon on the international markets, how should we go about taxes that are in the different countries? So neither Eric nor myself are tax advisors, but the key here, Arunima, especially in places like Europe, where you have different VAT rates between countries and things are changing there rapidly, definitely get a very good accountant who's going to help you with all of those. So I do recommend OSOME. They have experience with a lot of sellers in different regions. I'll drop a link to them below as well. But you can also look into Avalara or Amavat if you're selling in Europe, and I'll link those for you as well. But that's the key there. And thank you, Mohammed. And then Hussein says, hi, Dan. Mention a personal agency which can help in creating a company, an LLC in the US. I had asked you the same question in the last one. Well, I'm sorry I didn't get to that. But the best service for this is definitely Klemter. They have I've heard so many good things in terms of this for an LLC in the US, and they also help you with a bank account in the US. So I'll also drop a link to Klemter for you, obviously after this, but they're awesome. And Zubair, love you too. And IQ, yes, they do keep increasing the FBA fees.
Yeah, I think that's worth commenting on, in that, a lot of what we speak to is the mindset and the attitude to have towards selling. And so I just think there's a lot of grumpiness towards Amazon, and some of it's justified. I mean, we deal with Amazon all the time, and there are times when it's very frustrating, but there's such a big entity. A lot of it's how you manage your expectations. I think it's a little silly to assume you're not going to get frustrated. So I try to expect I'm going to get frustrated, and then when it happens, I'm not, thrown off kilter. But like, the rates are going to continue to increase. That's just business. I mean, if you talk to any business owner, the rent of their brick and mortar store goes up, or shipping goes up. Like, there's all kinds of these realities that we're dealing with, but there's just ways to navigate that as a business and to absorb it. And it's helpful for me to remember that the Amazon fulfillment infrastructure that's in place is that's the lubricant that allows my business to move and to turn. It's what makes the whole thing possible. So I try to be thankful that Amazon's doing that. And I know it's hard when they nickel and dime you a lot, but
I agree, Eric. I mean, I have done a lot of research into, okay, what else can we do? So if we don't do FBA with their fulfillment fees, FBA fulfillment fees, what we covered first here, then what else can we do? What other fulfillment services are there in terms of maybe selling from Shopify, etc.? I looked through so many, and I can tell you that even though they are increasing these fees, they're highly competitive. It is difficult to find a service outside of Amazon that can do it at this rate and as passively. There's often way more glitches in the system, things you have to monitor. FBA, although the fees are increasing, it works. I mean, how many times we don't even think about it anymore. People just buy the products with them. They return it, you don't even hear about it. It's a very, very good system, to give them some credit there, where credit's due. And then the increases, I think we also have to consider inflation. So your prices should also be slowly rising, and so too would FBA fees, especially if they print a lot of money. So, but that's a whole other area. And this one I'm interested in, Eric. So my limit for my ASIN is 1,000 pieces. I saw some health numbers, I think inventory health, like 90 or 80%. But what does that mean? And what is the percentage I should be aiming for? What do you think, Eric?
Well, I'm trying to understand those percentages. I mean, if you look at your account health page, there's all kinds of percentages. So I'm not sure exactly what Zaid is referring to. If you have defects on your account, which almost never happen through FBA because Amazon's taking responsibility for it, then you're going to have demerits on your account. And so if you have an 80%, it means, 2 out of 10 orders were shipped late through FBM or something like that. So maybe he can clarify for us what he's asking about. But I don't know of any explicit correlation between your account health and the limits. Now, again, IPI score is relevant for storage limits. We've talked about that. But, if you have a defect rate on your account health, you need to deal with that, and you need to mitigate the issue and make sure it doesn't continue. And then there's ways that you can apply to have that defect removed, et cetera, et cetera. That's a separate topic. But the fact that you have a defect shouldn't therefore mean that your limits are going to decrease. So I don't know of a correlation. If your limit's 1,000 pieces, that's not going to fluctuate because you've got 80 or 90% account health, if that's, exactly what he's referring to.
Okay. I've just been thinking on this, and it might be the buy box percentage that he's seeing. The buy box percentage will drop from 100 to 95 to 90. And the buy box percentage does not matter that much unless you have a hijack on the listing. But in a lot of cases, you might get like a return, which Amazon turns into a warehouse deal, and they sell on your listing as the warehouse deal, which is totally fine. But they're going to win the buy box on that deal, you see? So this can decrease your buy box percentage. So it's not uncommon to see it at 95, even 90. That's not like a big red flag. And in no way is that related to the limits. And Zaid, the 1,000 pieces, that's also very common. That's something Eric and I discussed prior, was new sellers, you're often going to see, and I know this makes it even more confusing, but not volume, but they're going to say, okay, 1,000 pieces is what you can send. So it's a good ballpark on your first order. Keep it to 1,000 or less. And why are some cost per click campaigns don't have, okay, so why do some campaigns not have suggested bids? So this is also an interesting one because I've noticed it as well. You create a PPC campaign and then the suggested bid is just missing. I know like some of the real reasons for it are that there's not enough keyword data, but I've noticed it almost like a glitch, like where you just don't get the suggested bid, which is difficult. What I recommend is just bid like whatever your kind of default would be for that niche. Get the campaign live, because once it's live, you're then going to get suggested bid data once it's actually running. So that's what I suggest there. And Sampurnananda, PPC series has really helped me a lot. Is lowering the price a good strategy to start without any reviews? Should we do FB ads when the listing is new, or is PPC the way? Eric, what do you think?
I think Facebook ads are tricky and complex and can be just a sinkhole for new sellers. So if I jump to that question, I think that's more based on how experienced you are with advertising in general. If you're doing a new launch, typically my recommendation, unless you're pretty experienced with selling, is to just stick with PPC. And the PPC campaign is what's going to give you good feedback on, if you set up a nice campaign initially, you're going to get good information as to how to adjust and fine tune your PPC campaign. You just don't have control like that with Facebook ads. So I'm not saying don't do Facebook ads, but to me, PPC is the way to go. I'm not convinced that lowering your price is the best way to move towards getting reviews. I mean, you want to make sales. The goal is to make sales, and then how you generate reviews is subsequent to that. So if you're convinced lowering the price or offering a coupon would help generate sales, that's kind of a separate issue. Now, how to get some reviews, you can, regardless of what your sales look like, you've got to figure out what your review strategy is.
Yeah, have a really good product. I think run PPC. PPC is very underrated. And the reason it's underrated, especially as a launch strategy, is it's not even seen as a launch strategy. It's not some like hidden secret silver bullet. So people underrate it and it's amazingly strong. So PPC is the way to go. Even if you're launching with 10 other external strategies, you should always have a PPC launch strategy, as we cover in part one, part two as well on the channel. I'll link those. A lower price can help, as Eric said, because step one is sales. Because if they don't have the product, there's no way they're going to review it. So if lowering your price is going to drive more sales, that can be a good strategy. But remember, when raising your price lower, you can actually, when raising your price higher later, you can actually lose the buy box if you do that too quickly. So be very, very incremental and slow with the price rise. And at the same time, strategize that in. Don't go too low because that way you don't have to raise it too much. So say you want to sell at $40, maybe start at $34.99, just as an idea. But totally agree, PPC over Facebook ads. And Arunima, is it possible to list your items on Amazon in the first page without ads or PPC? So is it possible to rank to page one without PPC? I've heard people get their ad accounts suspended or banned, is it possible to sell on Amazon without it? So I have not heard of, I don't see why people would get their ad accounts banned or suspended. I'm not even sure how you could do that because they, give you all the settings. However, it's possible, but highly improbable because you need, at first, when you list an item, it's going to be on page like 310 organically because no one's ever purchased it. And Amazon's not going to put it at the top because it doesn't give them sales. So you have to somehow artificially get it to the top. So people buy it. And when they buy it on the artificial one, the PPC ad, then the organic one starts to move up the results. So that's the strategy. So very improbable to rank top of page one without any PPC, but it is possible. Eric, any thoughts?
Nothing to add, really.
Okay. And Laura says, hi, Eric.
Yeah. Hi, Laura. Good to see you on with us.
And Claudia, I am in Canada selling in the US, so I only have to pay Canadian taxes. I have heard that if you use a 3PL in the US, I will have to also pay US taxes because I now technically have a business presence. This is a really, really good question. Eric, I know, and Eric is not a tax advisor, neither am I, and you should always contact yours before making decisions. But Eric, what's your opinion or, entertainment on this one?
Yeah, my opinion isn't worth very much on this. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, there are and have been for years raging debates on how to approach Nexus when it comes to, I don't really deal with international taxes. So just thinking US based, the reality is if you're selling through Amazon FBA in the US, you've got inventory all over the country. You've got it. There are currently, I think, 110 fulfillment centers in the continental 48 states. And so you easily could have product in 20 or 30 states. The fact that you have more at one 3PL facility than you do in like a fulfillment center is, in my opinion, pretty irrelevant. And when it comes, this is most relevant in the world of sales tax. And right now, a really good argument can be made. Amazon is clearly collecting sales tax for all 45 US states that are not sales tax exempt, and they're taking responsibility for that. So, I think those are pretty significant data points without having the expertise of a tax education.
Okay. And just to add also to that, Claudia, on like the corporation side, corporation tax side, as you have it, you're essentially saying you don't have to pay US taxes because you have the Canadian company. And if you're using FBA in that system, the reason for that is that the company is, or potentially is not engaged in trade or business in the United States. This rule is called ETBIS, engaged in trade or business in the US. The reason for that is that FBA is not solely providing a service, or in majority providing a service only for you. They do the same for millions of clients. And so that is not a dependent agent, what they call a dependent agent. Like if you hired someone in the US, a staff member who only worked on your business, that would be a dependent agent. And so using a service which helps multiple other customers is not a dependent agent. And that's often how the rule is seen. That's all I'm saying. So with a 3PL, it should be seen the same as FBA because it's also helping thousands of other clients. It's not your dependent agent. But anyway, that's just something I heard, and you should always check with your CPA as well. And Gareth, hi gents, my order's on hold for CNY. I have a company set up with a trademark and brand name. Do I need an accountant for my to pay my VAT and taxes? Thanks, Gareth. So, Eric, anything you want to touch on here in terms of, the ways to handle this? What's the best in your opinion? And how did you handle those things, even if it were just sales tax or normal US tax?
Yeah, I mean, over the years that I've sold with Amazon, that I've had my own business, I've found it invaluable to have a tax professional. So, I don't know tax law, and it can be really intimidating to me. So, and it doesn't take many Google searches for you to find stories that can intimidate you even further, about the guy in Wisconsin that got a bill from the IRS for $1.2 million or something. You just hear these and it can be fearful to know, how do I navigate these? You want to do it with integrity, but you just don't know what you're doing. So a tax professional to me is a must. And I mean, I've got a simple but a cool story about how it's a benefit. I mean, it's an expense because you're paying. It's another opportunity to spend money with your business. But about 2 years into my business, my tax professional looked over my numbers and he made a recommendation for how I could adjust my business, basically by incorporating in a different way than I had. And he was able to save me $5,000 to $7,000 a year on my taxes in perpetuity. I mean, I think that's been the case every year. And he helped me set in place a system by which I could just have the most efficient approach to taxes. And it was based on his advice. It wasn't because I knew what I was doing. And so to me, there's no promise something like that's going to happen, but you're investing in your own emotional well-being. You're investing in doing it right and with integrity. And oftentimes I do think like these guys know how to save you money. And so there can even be a monetary, value for, I've paid this guy every year and I think he saved me more than I'm paying him every year. So
yeah,
I just think that's the best avenue to pursue.
I 100% agree, Eric. I think my accountants have cost me absolutely nothing because the amount they will save you in terms of just understanding how it works, how the system works, not any shady stuff, but understanding. I remember the 1 year, I really thought I had it down because I still like to know the numbers and okay, this is, what the company owes or what have you. And I was pretty certain. I was like 99% sure I was correct. And he came around and said to me, no, that's wrong. Like, this is how much. And it was a much better amount. I was like, well, cool. I'm good with that. Like, so and I think almost anyone you ask who has an accountant working with them or for them will give you the same answer. They'll give you the same stuff. So it is, in my opinion, the most worthwhile expense actually in terms of your business. And then when you bring that on, Gareth, is up to you. So, but I would recommend early because Otherwise, they have what's called like a mid-year catch-up, where like everything you haven't done with them needs to kind of all be compiled and put together. So in my opinion, it's worth doing from the beginning, and it does pay itself back and then some. And next up, Aronima, while selling on Amazon with all the taxes to be fulfilled and PPC campaigns and storage fees in the fulfillment center, how much profit do we get in our bank accounts? That is the golden question. So I'm not sure. It really is going to depend on, everything. However, remember, taxes are generally only on profit. So it's not just an expense, it's when you turn profit. And it's a percentage only of that profit generally. And then on your PPC becomes profitable over time. So it's not an expense out of pocket. It comes a little bit off your sales. A conservative way to view it is you're going to spend $2 on PPC per unit you sell. And even at that rate, let's say your profit margin target is 43%, you might be at 37% profit because you're always paying that little bit of PPC. But that's still very healthy, keeps you driving sales until one day you can optimize it further. But again, that's like sunk in. And then storage fees are very minimal, actually, until you hit the longer term storage fees. And Eric, if you want to jump in here and just touch on that, have there been any changes with longer term storage fees?
There have been some. So, there are long-term storage fees for when you have product in a fulfillment center beyond 6 months, and then it increases again beyond 12 months. Amazon recently implemented what they call an inventory surcharge. And I'll share this real quick because I want to be reminded as to what they said. So if you look, so this hasn't changed yet. They put different dates for all these changes, but this change will happen in May. And so currently, items that are in a fulfillment center for 9 months to 12 months aren't given this assessment of $1.50 per cubic foot, but it's going to kick in starting in May. So basically the simple reality of what's happening is that Amazon is implementing another layer to their long-term storage fees. So, the bottom line for you is that when you have product in the Amazon FBA system for more than 6 months, it begins to occur like duplicate fees. Not only are you paying your monthly storage fees and of course fulfillment fees when you make sales, but now an additional layer of fees has been placed on top of that. So you pay your monthly storage fee and you would pay a long-term storage fee for having product in over 6 months. Then when it gets to 12 months, that second layer fee increases highly. And now what they're doing is they're nuancing it by putting a fee in at the 9-month mark.
Yes, and I think this is like one of the biggest benefits you can see of having a 3PL is because you can control that much more. You're not just sending like 3,000 units in, saying, okay, I know that's enough inventory for, 5.5 months. But then what if sales slow down? It's going to put you over. Then you have to removal order. And so with the 3PL, because you have that more expedited, frequent, smaller batch inventory replenishment, it's going to help you, reduce this risk as well. And then
at AP Prep Services, all of our monthly storage rates are static. They're flat fees. They don't change over time. If you've had product in our warehouse for over a year, it's the same. They don't change in the fourth quarter. We've tried to work really hard at keeping our fees simple flat fees. And in the entire history of the business, we've never increased monthly storage fees or the fees related to our Amazon automation process.
Awesome. And then Zaid, we will actually be doing a video on discounts, coupons, subscribe and save very soon as well. But anyone else, let me know below if that's something you do want to see. I do have something planned on that. And Kutsia, Hi, Dan and Eric. I found some customers would give product feedback under the seller review section. Is there any way to move those product reviews to the main product listing? Um, so yes, as far as I know, they can still do this where they can, I'm not sure if they can move it, but I know they can remove it. So, because you can do it the other way. If you get a very negative product review that should have been a seller feedback, you can ask Amazon to remove that because it's misplaced feedback. It's definitely worth the ask to see if they can move it. They may well be able to. And just remember to always position it as this will help customers. That's Amazon's goal. Um, Anything on this one, Eric?
I've never heard of Amazon taking. Often, what happens is you get a positive review for your product, but they leave it under your seller feedback, which is frustrating because it doesn't count as a review for your product. I haven't heard of Amazon ever being willing to, move that seller feedback as a product review. But what you can do, you're free to request. I mean, that's an indicator that the customer wants to leave a review. You can request a review from that specific customer in the hopes that they'll figure it out and post it. But I don't know. I've never heard of Amazon just moving that over. But you can have negative seller feedback removed pretty easily if it's misplaced.
Yeah, I think it's worth the ask. I would ask them for sure, and then see. And then extendo, how much inventory or units do you recommend to start with? Does inventory play a role in the algorithm? Because some people say if you have low inventory, Amazon's going to suppress the listing. So in my experience, no, they will not suppress the listing because of the number of units. That's much more based on sales velocity, how much you sell. And then obviously some listing aspects, like having a white background main image. If you have if you don't play by those rules, you could be suppressed. Units to start with, I always recommend lower. The reason being is it just minimizes your risk. It's never having the wrong product. It's having too much inventory of the wrong product. So my advice, particularly if you're not using a 3PL, is 500 max on the first order. I mean, you could go to 700. It depends on what your manufacturer can do, but lower is usually better, and it's usually more feasible at a higher price, higher sell price product. So that's just my idea on it, as it reduces risk. Yes, you might run out for a bit on the reorder, but that's a lesser evil than being stuck with 1,000 units you cannot sell because you didn't, find something or research something in depth enough with the product or build it the right way. But Eric, anything to add on this one?
No, I agree. The only thing I would add is I would position myself with the manufacturer to be prepared to pull the trigger on a second order. If I ordered 500 units and you're ordering 500 units because you expect the product's going to sell. And so I'd be watching very closely in the beginning to see if this sells the way that I hope it does. I want to have everything lined up with my manufacturer so that they're ready to, if the product has to go through production, I want to be able to pull the trigger on that as soon as I can. And now we're talking, I mean, that's a harder decision, I think, for how many units to supply secondarily. But I think then you want to make a significant increase to cut down on your per unit cost. And you've seen demonstrated sales velocity. Now you have an opportunity to maybe go a couple thousand and leverage a 3PL if you can't send them all to Amazon immediately, which I don't think you would want to do anyways. Sure. That's my long-winded way of saying I agree.
Yes, and Ismail, I agree. 500 is solid. And Claudia says, I only have a word mark trademark for my brand. And a word mark would be the actual word, like Nike, that would be the word. And then the swoosh would be like the brand mark. So word mark being the word, the pronounceable part. So should I just use the brand name on my mold, or should I use my logo, like the swoosh, which also contains the brand name, even though I don't have the design trademark, which you would get on the swoosh? So in terms of this, Claudia, you can include both. The key is that the word mark is there. That's the end of it. The word mark must be there. And then if you have it registered, I would put an encircled R next to that word mark. And then whether you have the logo there or not is up to you. Just ensure it's not previously protected. And if you just want to be like the safest possible, just have the word mark within the mold. But as long as the picture part, the logo is unique, that should be fine as well. And perfect. And then Daniela, I'm ordering 1,000 products which contain 3 variations. How do I know all 1,000 will be accepted when I create the shipping plan? So Eric, what are your thoughts on this one?
Create the shipping plan and see what Amazon tells you. So there's no risk. You can create a shipping plan and then delete it, and there's no penalty. That's not a misstep that Amazon's going to penalize you for. So if I'm understanding the question, you create the shipping plan to see what Amazon's going to determine. They'll flag you if you have limits and you can't send in all 1,000. They'll tell you, and they'll also, in creating that shipping plan, tell you what fulfillment center they want you to ship to, or how many fulfillment centers they want you to ship to in some cases. Make sure the ship from address is correct. So if you're doing it directly from your manufacturer, you want the manufacturer address in there. Yeah, that's my answer. So
Sure.
you don't know without actually creating the shipping plan, unless you've been a long-standing seller and you can look at your restock limits.
Yeah. I think they should accept it at 1,000 units because remember, these are often account-wide limits anyway. So 3 ASINs, 1 ASIN, it doesn't matter. So it would be like 333 of each. And then as Eric said, just make sure, number one, you've listed the products. So you have the 3 available in manage inventory and you're all good. And then do create a dummy shipping plan. So I'll link our shipping plan tutorial below as well. And then Daniela, use that, create it. And then on the last page, scroll to the very bottom and say, void this workflow. It's like this really tiny text, and that will delete it.
Yeah, and she just asked follow up if she should do that before starting production, and I don't see why not. Again, you can do it. You could do it multiple times. So you could do it, and maybe that would determine your decision about how many to put into production. But then you could create it again a couple weeks later to just see if anything's changed. What you don't want to do is have open protocols with your shipping plans. I noted that. I've noted that a couple times. There's been clients that work with AP Prep Services. We go to create a shipment. The limit comes in and prevents us from creating the shipment. But the reason is they have a workflow that's open, and Amazon is recognizing the units that they had intended to send in through that workflow in their restock scheme. So once you delete that workflow and wait 15 minutes, the restock limits will adjust.
That's a really good insight. Otherwise, you'll think, you've used up, because you're basically telling Amazon, I've used up all my storage or restock limits because I have all these open shipping plans. So just make sure you do delete them if they're not an actual final shipping plan. And you got it, automotive, Kutsia. And Zaid says it is sell-through rate. So he has a low sell-through rate. And what is your recommendation? Eric, if you have any just advice, how do we boost sales?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would do is identify what's causing the low sell-through rate. So if you've only got one product, now you're trying to boost sales for that product. Could be, as you look at your account, you've got one product that's a trouble product, and you can troubleshoot that specific product. Or, I do a lot of arbitrage, and arbitrage will create that issue as well, but that's a separate topic.
Okay. And then it's just about moving that inventory swiftly. because again, this is an example, a very good example of where a 3PL could help, or just ordering lesser inventory, because you've got a whole lot sitting there. And that's what Amazon is saying. You're not selling this quick enough. So you, Zaid, will probably have lower restock limits, because they don't want you sending too much until you improve the sell-through rate. And then they're going to say, cool, send in as much as you want, because you're selling through it quickly. So that's what you have to work on here, is probably just don't over order and then drive a lot of sales. And that should sort that. And Ismail, I created a listing and I sent inventory to Amazon, but our inventory has gone to fixed standard inventory and fixed stranded inventory. I'm not sure. And with a new ASIN.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons why you can have inventory that gets stranded, and you should be able within your Seller Central account to look at your stranded inventory tab and try to troubleshoot what the issue is. Amazon's pretty clear with like what the issue is. It might be something related to your listing that once you fix it, it'll go active. It might be, I don't know, there's a number of problems. So I wouldn't be too quick to create a new listing with a new ACE, and that creates a whole bunch of issues. Now you've got to create a removal order, relabel products often. So I would try to unstrand that inventory. Stranded inventory, when you first encounter it, can cause a panic, but it's not necessarily a big deal. It depends on what the issue is.
Awesome. And Claudia, we don't do the Q&A every single week, but I do enjoy having guests like Eric on from time to time. And then we do one of these every single month, though. We did our last one last week. If you want to check that out, we've done 2 of those, but those are like really big Q&As. And then Poshwood asks, restock limits for my account are way higher, so I can send more in Q1 than Q4. So, and we do about 50% of our total sales in Q4. Should we expect restock limits to stay high throughout 2022? I'll just add one thing here, and Eric, then you can take it. But you can expect restock limits to be tighter in Q4, because that's when we also have an influx of new sellers. That's when we have a huge amount of inventory being sent to the centers. So that's when they're really going to tighten it up, and then usually open it up more in Q1. But anything you want to add to this, Eric?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Dan. And what I think this demonstrates is Amazon's determination to allow its own decision-making and flexibility when it comes to these limits. It's funny, one of the, as I was reading, one of the utilization factors for these limits, they say explicitly sales volume, an increase in sales volume will increase your limits. But the final point that Amazon published is the availability of fulfillment center capacity, which is something that's completely out of your control and completely out of my control. And so Amazon, what that means in my interpretation of that statement is Amazon's sitting there monitoring their fulfillment capacity. They're watching all their fulfillment centers. They know what the volume looks like, and they're going to adjust their restrictions accordingly. And they've been very clear with these restock limits, at least it's clear as I read them, that they've given themselves a lot of maneuverability to adjust the limits based on what they need to do. So I wouldn't make any assumptions, Poshwood, about, because he says in the next one, should we expect, oh, and you got that there, should we expect them to stay high? I say no, absolutely not, because you should expect that they're going to change, and they're going to fluctuate. And then it is clear to all of us, as Dan said, as you near the fourth corner, they're going to hunker down, but they're going to make all sorts of potential changes to those limits throughout the year. And you've just got to kind of watch it. So at a time like this, you say, hey, this is great that our limits are high, though that makes sense because it's January. Well, I guess it's February now. Still makes sense. But don't assume that it's just going to continue that way.
For sure. And guys, I want to thank everyone who joined us today, everyone in the chat as well. Please do give us a like if you did enjoy it and getting all of Eric's experience and answers on this. Remember to subscribe to the channel. And if you did find this insightful, helpful, and you can see where these inventory problems actually come in, I definitely recommend you check out AP Prep below. It's the first link there. I'll also make a pinned comment, but that is Eric's service. So if you like how Eric works and you wish to partner up with him to help you negate these issues, make that inventory just easier, take more control over it, definitely check out AP Prep below. And then, Eric, a last question here I want to finish off with is actually Daniela's question, but could you share some tips for new sellers in 2022? Now, this doesn't have to be inventory based, but what to look out for and mistakes to avoid. What would be your, big takeaways?
Well, gosh, if I zoom back from a coaching perspective, the most common mistake I see new sellers make is that they truncate product research and they make a hasty decision to launch a product because they're impatient and they've been unwilling. That maybe sounds harsh. They've been unwilling to do the hard work of product research so that the data is really driving their decision. So my experience as an Amazon coach is that the product research phase, though the most important, maybe because it's the most important, can just be difficult. It can feel like a mire and a swamp for a new seller. You can't just check off a lot of to-dos and feel really productive. You're just kind of swimming around in this thing called product research, trying to get your bearings. And you've got this one big to-do, like find a high potential product, and you can't just check it off. And so I've just seen too many sellers that provokes an anxiety in them that makes them want to just pick something and move to the launch. And almost every time they do that, they're using their instincts, which aren't well formed, and they're making a bad decision rather than wading through that difficult season of product research until there's enough clarity that you feel like there's a confidence in your ability to identify a high potential product. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be any risk, but you're mitigating risk because you're recognizing how to read the data, and the data is driving your confidence to make a good decision in your product launch. So that's not just a tip or a trick, but when I step back, new sellers, that's where they falter. And almost every time somebody perseveres through the product research phase, they come out the other side really thankful. I've never had somebody I've worked with look back and wished they'd have been more hasty in their decision. But I often talk to people that look back and wish they had just been more patient through product research. And a year from now, you won't care that it took 4 or 6 weeks longer. You'll be glad you made a good decision.
I would add to that, Eric, as well, is because I really, really agree with this. And also to take your time in developing the product. I mean, one of the key metrics, Eric spoke about data, but would be how much can I develop it further? How can I improve this product? How can I bring something new to market? That's a key. You don't want to sell the same thing. But in that, take time to develop it with the supplier. I'm talking, it could take you 3 months to develop the product correctly with the supplier in terms of all its design. And that would be absolutely fine. So don't be too hasty with that. Okay, I'm going to develop it with the supplier over 2-3 weeks. That's probably way too short. Remember, you're putting a lot of monetary energy and physical energy into this. Take your time. There's nothing wrong with that. And I second what Eric said. No one ever complains about taking their time. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes people will actually say, "Oh, I should have been quicker. Now the market's saturated." Well, would you want to be in the saturated market? Probably not. So it's and that's the biggest one I think I hear there. But overall, from my side, I would say higher price. So, $35 plus, just because it works with the fixed costs in the business. It's more profitable. I would definitely second what Eric said. Take your time. I would also say, look out for giftable markets. Giftable markets are huge, and people pay a premium because it represents themselves when they give that gift to someone else. So they spend more, and it gives you a lot of opportunity in product design. Again, those would be the very big things. And then lastly, do not over order in the very beginning. It's not having the wrong product. It's having too much of the wrong product. And if you do, of course, you're going to want to scale up. When you scale up orders, definitely look at a 3PL because it negates a whole lot of risk. And a great one is AP Prep. I use it myself. But Eric, I want to thank you very much for coming on, spending your time with us and sharing your knowledge here. And thank you everyone in the chat as well. I will be dropping all of the resources below as well as we mentioned here. But Eric, thank you again.
Glad to do it. You're welcome. Look forward to doing it again someday.
We will, for sure. Also, comment below, what would you want to have Eric on again for in the future? Just a topic, idea, doesn't even have to be inventory, but just something else you would want to hear, and we can get him back on in the future. But thank you guys for watching and liking and subscribing, and definitely check out AP Prep if you need this type of service. But I wish you an awesome weekend, and I'll catch you in the next video. All right, guys.